Hey team, it's Les. Thanks for joining me today for another CHOT training minute. Today we're going to start a new series that we're calling Painting the Picture, Quality Documentation in Hospice. So this is going to be a multi-part series and we're going to talk about documentation, give you reasons why we document the way we do, and then we'll get into some specifics, some tips and tricks, things that you might be able to use to help beef up your documentation. So we'll jump right into it. So, why is quality documentation important? Well, there's several reasons. First of all, it shows that care was provided to the patient and family. So, obviously, those of you that went through nursing school, you've heard it a million times, right? If you didn't document it, you didn't do it. So, first and foremost, we document to show that we provided the care that we say we provided. Second, it provides continuity of care among team members. So if we have quality documentation, if everybody has quality documentation, then it's easy to see that as we read through narrative notes and we read through that documentation, that there's a continuity of that quality and that documentation from nurse to nurse and from discipline to discipline for social workers and spiritual care coordinators. It also demonstrates compliance with rules and regulations, right? And that's one of the things that we have to prove over and over again to CMS and to auditors. It illustrates a patient's eligibility for hospice. Again, this is something that we constantly have to do, and you know that we have to do this because we have certification periods, right? So the patient goes through a certification period, and then we have to document and take all the documentation that we've done and justify why a patient should be recertified and should continue to be on hospice. Quality documentation supports the claims that we file to our payer sources, so to Medicare, Medicaid, insurance companies. That quality documentation will prove to them that we did deliver the care that we said we were delivering. And also, it reduces the risk of denials when we're audited. And notice I say when we're audited, not if we're audited, because we are and will continue to be in perpetuity audited, whether that's by CMS themselves asking for what we call ADR requests or additional documentation requests, where they say, hey, you've filed all these claims. Let's take a 10 random claim sampling and you send us information that we request on those particular claims. So we want to dig a little more, right? We want to audit your charts, and then there's behind them there's a plethora of other agencies that audit us as well. Agencies that audit us after we've billed and after we've collected money to try to recoup money if they can, if they find that our documentation is lacking. So quality documentation reduces the risk that we're going to be denied payment or that we're going to have to give back money. And that's obviously very important. So, what is painting the picture? Well, painting the picture really means we're telling a story. In hospice, again, more than any other kind of, and I say this a lot, more than any other kind of healthcare, it's different, right? So if we worked in an acute care setting, like a hospital, and a lot of you probably did work in acute care settings or have worked in acute care settings, you chart to the exception, right? You chart to basically what the problem is, why they're at the hospital. We really focus on that issue and then we move along, right? With hospice, we get to tell the story more and we get to take everything into account that's affecting that person's prognosis. Documentation shouldn't just focus on the diagnosis, but rather the prognosis. So, what does prognosis mean? Because it gets thrown around a lot and that word gets used a lot in hospice, but do you really know what it means? Well, prognosis just means the likely course of a disease. And so, what CMS or the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services say, because they're the ones that set the rules for hospice that we play by, they say that a patient's prognosis to be on hospice should be 6 months or less if that disease or that disease process is allowed to run its natural course. So, in other words, they're not going to the hospital to get aggressive treatment for a disease. If they've got cancer, they're no longer doing aggressive treatments like chemo and radiation. Now, Could they do chemo and radiation in a palliative for palliative reasons? Sure. But the aggressive treatment of those diseases gets set to the side when someone comes on hospice, because they can't be doing aggressive treatment for a disease and receive hospice at the same time. So that 6-month prognosis is when we let the disease run its natural course. And because now hospice is prognosis based and not simply diagnosis based, we should be documenting all of the diagnoses that patient has, those comorbidities that contribute to that prognosis of 6 months or less. So in other words, a patient might have COPD as their primary diagnosis. And of course, we're going to document on their breathing, right? On their lung sounds and their capacity and their endurance. We're going to document on all those things, but they might also have a secondary or comorbidity of coronary artery disease. They might be diabetic. They might have other issues and other diagnoses that are also contributory to that COPD, causing their prognosis to be shortened. So we can and we should take advantage of being able to document on all of those disease processes. And that gives us the full picture, right? So what we're going to be talking about as we go forward in this series is ways to document to that prognosis, and some tips and tricks, some language that we use, the language of hospice documentation, some things that auditors will be looking for when they audit our charts. As always, I want to thank you for joining me today. We're going to make this one short, and we'll get back into it next week. If you have any questions, concerns, or if you have ideas for future trainings, don't hesitate to email me or click me. And I want to thank you for everything you do every day for our patients, families, facilities, and for one another. Y'all have a great day.